Patrick, way, way, way too long, man. It is so great to see you. Seeing you got the COVID beard going and everything else too, man. How are you holding up? And like I said, I'm so happy to get a chance to see you because we were just talking before the interview. It's been a long time since we've seen each other, man.
It has. It's been, I would say, the better part of 8 years. And yeah, man, it's been a wild ride. I would say that I basically had many times over those 8 years where music was a thing of the past. It was a fun memory and nothing else. And so, for better, for worse, it's something I've been completely unable to shake. So here we are again. But I'm really happy, yeah, that we're doing this. It's been way too long.
Man, when you think back in those days, um, Juno nominations, for Best New Group and Best Pop Album, the Much Music Video Awards, where we would be doing the red carpet interviews, and the crowds would be screaming. And in fact, I'm trying to remember too. I think I was on one of your video sets at one point too. I mean, it was a fun role. What was it like for you, man, to be part of all that pop, rock? R&B, you guys are mixing it all in, representing Canadians, but man, doing it in such a great, fun fashion. And the fact is, man, when it came to summertime, summertime wasn't summertime without music from stereos.
Hey man, I love to hear it, especially like this far out, to be honest with you, because I think you go through a lot of emotions after the fact, when it doesn't work out long term, I guess, like you could say with us. And so for us, it was a very much a whirlwind. But being able to look back in retrospect, and then the thing that started off this whole new wave was reunion shows. And I bring that up just because hearing what it meant to other people, I think that I didn't really grasp the size of it until very recently, to be honest with you, because when you're in the middle of it, I've said this before, but on one hand, it was really good because I never felt like the moment was too big for me because I felt like I belonged there. So when we went within 2 months of releasing our first single, and we're playing shows with Black Eyed Peas, you know what I mean, on these huge stages and festivals, I was never scared because I was like, I belong here. Now, the other side of that is that I don't know if I had a ton of like, oh my God, I'm so lucky to be here moments, which is sort of sad as well. And I've only kind of gotten those in retrospect, being like, oh, that was me. Like I was the one who was, going on those stages. And it's kind of like realizing it way further down the road. So it's been kind of interesting to really grasp what we actually did. It's weird.
Turn It Up was the song for me.
Turn
And
it up.
I
Love that.
I really think that song was the staple point for the band. What did that song do for you guys? Because to me, that song brought you an international stage.
That's it's a really interesting point you make because you're right. I think that there was sort of this running joke. We were on Video on Trial. You remember that show?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Where it's just an absolute roast. Which funny about that is that I've always loved being roasted. I don't know what it is. Maybe it goes back to being like in hockey and just that's the way you show affection with your friends in a locker room type thing. I have no idea, but they made a joke about how hopefully their next song isn't called "Throw Your Hands Up" and sounds exactly like "Summer Girl." It's like it's a pretty good one. I like that song too, but I do think "Turn It Up." Yeah, it was really cool for me because it took it in. It definitely, I think, made our sound more less one dimensional. Now that's a funny thing is that people always talk about us as like the autotune band, but like really it was only the one single that really went heavy with it. And so I thought the more singles we were able to release, we were able to show, I guess more sides to us, which we've always had. The band started out because we were writing pop punk songs with 50s and 60s like soul chord progressions and melodies. And so that's where it even came to the whole doo-wop thing was because I was obsessed with like Motown music. And so I've never fit into one box ever. And so again, sorry to answer your question. I think that Turn It Up really was able to demonstrate that for us for sure.
The music industry has changed as we're doing Zoom. Nobody would ever have thought of doing a Zoom interview back then. We had this thing, social media. Again, same thing. But also the style of music has changed, of course, because that's evolution in music. That's what it does. What was going on with the band as the music was changing and the band members were also looking at, other venues? Because when you're creative, you're not only sticking just with one thing. Sometimes you want to do solo work. Sometimes you may want to do something completely different. Just the fact that that's what happens when you have that kind of artistic drive. It's not sometimes just about music, it's about other things. What changed up for Stereos?
That's you put it so well, because I kind of I find that there's some people, and I do think it's kind of changing from us, but there are some people who will use terms like, "Oh, it's not what's real music." You know what I mean? You're not playing real music. To me, it's like I've I don't only watch comedy movies. I don't only watch action or horror or anything like that. I would lose my mind if I only watched one of those genres. So why is music the same way? Why can't we do, like hip hop, R&B influenced stuff like we did in the early days, and then do some rock and roll and all? Like I'm a creative person, and over the last once I started getting back into writing over the last few years, I was writing songs for Treehouse, like for kids songs. And it's not, maybe my favorite necessarily, but I had a ton of fun doing that. We just did some like goal songs for the IIHF World Championship Hockey tournament that's going on right now in Latvia. And again, like my favorite thing is writing like pop songs. I think my songs are always hook driven, but there are country elements on the new album. I mean, I wouldn't say there's country songs, but there's definitely elements there. And I think that it just makes me the most well-rounded writer, but at the same time, it makes me happy. I really write for an audience of one. And I've been lucky that the guys really support it. When I come up with the idea, they're on board. But to me, if it makes me happy, that's all that matters.
We kind of talked about this before we started because now we're going to get into the new music and what we're going to be hearing. You talked about that the passion never ends. When did you start getting, if I can call it the itch, on what? It's about time to start releasing some songs again. We need some for the summer.
Yeah, I can pinpoint it specifically. So we had our 10-year anniversary coming up, and you only get that once, right? If you don't do something for that 10-year anniversary, then it's 11 years, and that number is way less interesting. So we decided to put on a show in Toronto, and no booking agents or venues were really that excited.
Okay, who else was on? Who else was on that show? Because it wasn't just you.
Nope. So Kiara Young
Yeah,
and Neverest.
that's it. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I actually spoke with the guys from Nevers about that show, and I was trying to get a hold of you guys, but it was just so tough, and it was the timing. So
Yeah.
that I heard was an amazing show. In fact, Neverest was actually thinking about maybe this is time for us to do the
I
comeback.
got the itch as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it was an amazing show, man. We had, like I said, no promoters would take it. So the guy who's now our manager now, Andrew, he was a fan back in the day, and he was working in the music industry and just trying to really like hustle and make a name for himself. So he's like, I'll book it. And so not only did he book it, but Canadian Music Week at the time were like, like it doesn't really fit with what we're doing. But they said, we'll let you put it on the roster as the poster, but you're doing all the promo. So a week out, it had sold out, and we didn't know if like 200 people would come, because why wouldn't I trust booking agents and promoters that people probably just don't want to hear Stereos anymore? But it sold out, and it was I can't even really describe. That was the most meaningful thing. Also, like recognizing kids that I remember what they looked like at 14, and now they're 24, they're in med school, and they would talk about how these group of friends would come up, and this is like, honestly get emotional thinking about it, where they had no friends in junior high, but they found each other at stereo shows, and then they had friends, and now they're still friends, and they're going to each other's like baby showers. Man, it was powerful. And so that was it. And it was our 10-year anniversary 2 years ago. Changed everything. It was amazing.
So now in 2020, you sort of did a soft release, right?
We did. And so that was the first song. It's called Sunset Gold, that I wrote for this new iteration of Stereos. I got really into like tropical house playlists and just vibey music. And I wanted to come, because just to go back to the start, my whole thing was, we're a live band, but let's put the live band behind sounds. I'm sorry, this bird's going nuts.
That's okay, man.
That was good. But let's put a live band behind sounds you wouldn't hear. So I was huge into like the Dream and all the stuff he was writing, whether it be, like the hip hop R&B T-Pain, and putting a live rock band behind it. So this time I was like, well, why don't we put that behind some of this EDM stuff that's going on? And of course, I would never suggest that 2020 was a positive for people, but it did make us pump the brakes to not go full that way, because I think I kind of would have. But I love that song. Yeah, so we put out Sunset Gold just to put out something new, and I think we're going to include it on the new album, because I think it really is a good indication of kind of the where I'm at writing wise, for sure.
I hope you do, because off the top, as soon as I heard it, I thought of Miami Vice.
Love that. Exactly. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought, that was perfect. It was, to me, it was that kind of theme. How tough was it though to be okay? So here you are, you've got the itch, you're getting back into music, but then the world is dealing with COVID-19. So how are you and the guys getting together? How are you recording this? How are you resetting things up? And was there a point where you're going, man, COVID's going to kill us, literally, like career wise? Can we do this during this tough time?
So no, thankfully. What COVID did is it didn't make it easy on us. I'll say that. So I had to just write for no end goal in mind. I didn't know what we were working towards because we can't play shows. And obviously, that's like a big component to this whole thing. But it did allow me to take a step back and really think about what I wanted to do. And so I wrote half this album since October, this last October 2020, which is like 6 songs. So that to me, it allowed like me to pump the brakes. When I first went, I did some writing trips to Toronto, and there were lockdowns, but you were able to, like, it was limited, but it wasn't completely shut down. But in January, when we recorded the album, we had to keep it very, very tight, distance, masked the whole time in the studio unless I was singing. So it was, you know, and then the other side of that is like I was completely alone. So I moved to Toronto for essentially all of January and couldn't do a thing because right there's no nothing there's no restaurants, there's nothing I could really do. And so for the first time in my life, I hated weekends. Do you know what I mean? Because we weren't working. So I was like, let's get back in the studio 9 a.m. Monday. And so we worked our tails off all January just getting this done. I would say the pandemic has spared no one in terms of like just my personal life and things like that that led to a lot of the writing since October, which completely shifted the tone of the album, I think, where we have, I would say, very fun sounding pop songs, but I do think there's way more depth in the lyrical side of it. And so it was, I'm not looking for sympathy. I think a lot of people went through this, but it was definitely the toughest year of my life. So I'm not trying to say it was easy, but I think I'm able to see all the silver linings that have come out from having gone through that and then putting it just into this outlet for sure.
All right, let's look at the new single 2021 Stereos, new single. What's the single called and what's the theme behind this, sir?
The song is called Look Good. And again, I think it sounds like a really fun, funky pop song. The idea, though, is I'm in a really bad place, but it's okay for me to feel self love, no matter what that looks like for any individual. And so I really hope it can kind of speak to people on that level just to get out there, look good, feel good, and love yourself, even when it feels like the world is telling you you shouldn't.
Now, here's the interesting thing because we just talked about what the pandemic has done professionally for a lot of people. We can't get together. Look back 10 years ago when we look at stereo music videos, it's a crowd of people, it's a party.
Yeah.
How is that going to change now with trying to record new videos when we right now as we speak can't do what we were able to do 10 years ago?
No, you're totally right. So there's two things with that. One, we can't, you're right, physically do like the big crowds. I don't know about you, man, but like I'll watch like a Netflix show and get anxiety with a big group of people. Like my brain in 1 year has already shifted to like, what are they doing? Like you guys, you know what I mean? Which is,
Exactly.
I got to work out of that. The other side though is that when we first saw Success, we were like 20 something young men. Okay. And so we hammered every cliche, dude, like boats, beaches, girls, cars. And, it was fun. But I think even if there were no pandemic, I would love to be a little bit more creative and inclusive with the direction that we head with our videos, anyways. And so we're dealing with that right now. Like we'd like to do a video for this single. We have a crew like ready to go. But we're kind of waiting for the meeting parameters to allow for it. But even with that said, I would really like to do something that's a little bit more creative than a big party scene, drinking from solo cups. Just because I think we've done that to death, to be honest.
Yeah, but it's still fun. The other thing I was amazed about when I heard this single was the fact that vocally, I don't think I've ever heard anybody get older, but their voice sounds younger. How the hell did you
Younger.
pull that off? Because man, your voice sounds amazing, but honestly, you sound like you're even younger than you did before.
Well, thank you. I don't know what that would be attributed to. I think that so when we started doing the reunion shows, I started going back to vocal coaching and working with this incredible coach and just finding my tone. And like, I do think that I'm glad all my favorite bands have kind of changed. Like the way they sound over time anyway. So I don't know if it's like a concerted effort. Younger, I like that though. I'll take that all day, especially as I get older. Hearing things that make me feel younger are always like a huge bonus. So
You know, it's amazing because for the last 2 weeks, I've had a chance to talk to you, Stereos. I've had a chance to talk to Rain Maida, Our Lady Peace. They're
wow.
releasing an album. I've had a chance to speak to one of the members of the Tea Party, releasing a new single. It seems like, and if I can use the word nostalgia, seems to be back and stronger. And I've talked to other people, and a lot of people feel like, again, this is part of what the pandemic has done to people. It's almost making them think back to, if you want to say, the good old days and the music that we listened to and things like that. What do you think about that?
I think you've nailed it. Like, and that's what I've heard. And that's sort of like plays into how I feel about this band myself. I felt like in the first few years after we broke up, I almost had this inferiority complex about, oh, we were a boy band. And, like people kind of think of it as like cheesy or whatever. But like we all started in the punk rock scene. We all, like Stereo started in a basement with the only thing we wanted to do was get in a van and tour. And so that nostalgia that we created, I think really does speak to people. And I hear it now from people like, I love that stuff. And like the amount of times people will, like, Instagram has really opened up a world to people who I never would have met otherwise. The amount of like direct messages or story mentions I get where people are, sun's out, summer girl time, and they're like playing the song. So of course, from maybe an ego standpoint, I would love for us to sort of expand past being a nostalgia play, but I would also lack self-awareness completely if I didn't understand that it's a huge thing that draws people to us, and that I have to embrace that. I do love that. The fact that we ever had a place anywhere in someone's, heart or ears is beyond what I ever thought would happen when, again, we started in a basement and really sucked.
But look what you guys have become, and it really is something really important to the Canadian music fabric of yesterday and today and tomorrow too. And speaking of tomorrow, you mentioned about 6-song EP or album. Do we have a feel? And what you kind of mentioned it before, but I want to revisit it. What's this going to feel like? And do we have any idea of a name or we're looking at a release?
Yeah, so it's gonna. I think we recorded 12, and it'll be a 10-song album.
10.
And then, oh my goodness, it's the best way I can put it is that it is Stereos in the way that we don't follow many rules, which, God bless our producer for having to go through that and mix one song that sounds completely different from another one. It has been a roller coaster ride trying to, like, the amount of times in the studio we'd say, like, what genre is this song? And I guess at the end of the day, it's all pop. But again, I think I think there's more depth in the lyrics. I think it's funny to hear an album that I think is completely up tempo and happy feeling, but is in some ways even tough for me to listen to some songs, because I do think that there's a lot of emotion and just personal experience that has gone into the writing. But to answer your question about the name, we're close, but until we like know it for sure, I'm not going to announce it. And I think we're looking at the fall.
Okay.
Just like, again, this is me learning from our manager. I think the way it works now is that we put out singles over the summer, and then go that route with the streaming side of it, and then hopefully that'll buy us some time that if we put out an album in the fall, that a tour can like hopefully happen very soon after that.
And that's what I was going to ask. Are we even looking at maybe even a virtual performance at some point?
So again, this is the punk rock kid in me.
Mhm.
I will do whatever we need to. If there's a virtual performance and that's what we need to do, great. I would really like to hold off until we can get in front of people, because that's just like, that's the payoff to me. It's playing it in front of people and feeding off the crowd. That's what it's all about. And so to me, a world where we're playing a show but people aren't there is really not ideal. But again, I understand that there are circumstances, many outside of our control right now. But if we can take this thing long enough to the point where like shows actually do open up again, I think that's definitely the priority. And I know it is already being very closely looked at in terms of dates and venues already. So it's going to happen.
If we can jump in the Back to the Future DeLorean and go back to that young Patrick kid who was going down in the basement, putting this band together and, playing this music. If we could go back there, what advice would you have given that young Patrick?
Yeah, I have a very specific answer to that. I think that it would be, again, we worked our butts off to get there. Like we quit jobs just to go play one show in Winnipeg because we thought we'd open for a big band and there were only 20 kids. Like Stereos before the reality show was a very DIY punk rock mentality band. For some reason, when the industry happened to us on our second album, didn't do as well, which by the way is still 600 kids a night, but because it wasn't 1,200 kids a night, it got to us and we quit. And that's one thing I look back on where I would say, just take this in stride, recognize what you have and stick with it, because that's the one thing that doesn't really make sense to me is why we just, broke up. I think we could have taken time off, come back and did something else, but that one blip where we all walked away from it, I think was something that I would do differently. And so I would just say, you're getting into an industry with no rules. There are no rules. So if you're still willing to do this and accept the fact that, you're just doing it because you love it, not because you're going to get successful, and just keep going.
I'm curious though, when you talked about, band quitting, to me personally, from what I remember back then, um, you had, the social media was just sort of kicking up. You had Napster, you had um, record companies being bought out by bigger record companies. There were a slew of Canadian bands back then that were all sort of like breaking and all at the same level. In fact, sometimes you'd look at the charts and the top 10 would just all be Canadian. So to me, I would look at it as there was so much change going on. The fact that you guys stayed together as long as you did blows my mind, because I could not, I wouldn't even know how to go through that kind of pressure in dealing with all of that. That must have been immense.
Yeah. And so, I mean, there's so much behind the scenes, and it was very easy for me to point fingers at first because our deal wasn't great. I've been very open about that. And so you start feeling like you were taken advantage of. Maybe that was the case. But at the same time, I do think I have the presence of mind to recognize how much opportunity we were given. I mean, this sounds sort of like I'm defending them, but they had such a big piece of us that we were pushed so hard, and it really did benefit us. And a lot of the fingers I can point can be at myself for things. And like, you get this attitude. I have this analogy of the music industry that's one day you're at your first video shoot and you're like, oh, 1 second, I'm just going to go get a water. And someone's like, oh, no, don't go. No, I'll go get it. You stay here. And then a year later, you're like, hey, would you mind grabbing me a water? And they're like, who do you think you are? Get your own water. That to me is the music industry.
Yes.
Where it's like, what just happened? Like, I got used to, being thought of a certain way. And then I started thinking that, like, I've been very open with the band and like in interviews that, like, I do think that I certainly believe my own hype for a while, and that can be good, that can be bad, but it's just like a wild, just complete cycle that I don't know if people are really like equipped to deal with a lot of the time.
No, and I agree with you. And here's the thing, it's still going on today. And it was going on even before you guys got together. And I don't think that is ever going to change. But what does change is artists like yourself that understand what longevity is all about. And you always find a way to share your music with the rest of us, because we're always waiting for those great songs. And you're doing it again for us for 2021. Stereos, summer music. That's the way we got to get through this time, man. Thank you so much for the music. Before we go, social media, where do we go to follow you?
So all the band accounts are at We Are Stereos. And if you'd like to follow me personally, I'm Kordyback to the Future on Instagram, which is the dumbest name of all time, very long, and the Kordyback on Twitter. But yeah, definitely follow closely. Like the song is going to be coming out very, very shortly. And I appreciate the nice words. Thank you. Because, I've certainly never lacked self-confidence. I say that tongue in cheek, but I do appreciate hearing it from other people that they enjoy it. And I believe that, man. I do think that people just want to feel good again. So let's do that. And I think that at least this first single is very much that kind of song.
My brother, we had a great time back then, and I'm so glad that the good times are still continuing. Thank you so much for the interview. And like I said, man, just thank you for all of this.
Thank you. I'll do it again.